Start. Okay, so good evening everybody, this is Piyush. So as you all know that we have started a series, and in this particular series we are basically talking about the important areas or the probable areas for Mains 2025. So as you all know, that I teach history portion, and that is why in 2 lectures I'll be talking about basically some of the important areas of history. And I believe that these lectures or the series of lectures are quite helpful for you, at least those who have been attempting the Mains 2025. So first of all, since you guys have literally cleared this pre of 2025, and I believe that clearing pre in the present day or in the modern time, in the current scenario, is very tough. And it has become quite dicey, so there is no one traditional way of preparing for the pre, and it is all depending that how do you perform in the day of examination, because the questions are mostly coming in form of bouncers. So how balanced you are, how do you use, how do you use your wisdom in the day of examination. So there are multiple factors which are helping you to clear this pre. So frankly speaking, if you have really crossed this first level or the first layer of this examination or of this civil services examination, that was really commendable, right? That was really that must be appreciated. So many congratulations to you. And so we have been just trying to add some sort of value in your Mains preparation, that ultimately you can perform better in the examination, right? So this is the purpose. So while keeping this in mind, we have come up with this series, and in fact, every person who is specialized in a particular area, they had been just coming up with certain sort of guidance or the ideas for their respective papers that can help you to write the Mains examination. Now the question is this also, that why is it needed, right? This question may be asked, that what is the need of this? When you have been preparing for the pre-examination, at that point of time you go very random, you prepare so many areas, because the facts are there, they can be picked up from anywhere, they can be asked to you, but then when it comes to Mains examination, the question is quite relevant and quite simple one, that is it possible or is it feasible for us to prepare all the areas or all the themes, all the subjects which are there, and that too in a very extensive way, considering that thing that when you have limited amount of time. Because when you have been writing pre, you do have the open-ended time. Why? Because maybe a couple of you starting your preparation from the month of, let's say, December. Couple of you have been starting your preparation, let's say, from the month of September or October also. It is all depending that how comfort you have been feeling. So you have been dedicating time in that way. But then when it comes to Mains examination, unfortunately this opportunity is not there with you, and you have to somehow you have that limited time, which is now even lesser than 3 months, and you have to prepare. And there are so many areas that you need to prepare. As you all know that the GS portion is there of 1000 marks, and at least if you really want to be selected, so it must cross 400. If you have been scoring somewhere around 420, 430, or at least if you have been crossing 400, that is good for you. In fact, you have been securing your chance to clear this exam. Then it comes to the optional. So this is undoubtedly one extensive area that you need to prepare, because all these optional, except few optionals, they are bulky, such as if you talk about PSI, if you talk about history, if you talk about geography. These are the areas which are slightly lengthy also, and covering the syllabus. In fact, I'll say simply the revising syllabus, that too in limited span of time, itself becomes quite challenging. And then how do you go for this writing practice and other things? That is the secondary question. So it is not that easy to cope up with all these areas. And then apart from that, some essay paper is there, and essay has also become a sort of quite important area, because either you're scoring very good in the essay or you are not scoring very good in the essay. That is going to decide your journey in your final result also. So that's the reason, because of what you have to keep in mind so many things, and then only that is how you have been preparing for the Mains. So what I'm trying to simply suggest to you, it's very simple, that you have to minimize your content, right? You have to minimize your topics as well, then only you'll be able to somehow perform better. Because if you have been reading everything, in that case it is almost going to be impossible that you have revised everything, that too in same extensive way, and then you have been writing examination. Because if you will be doing this, in that case definitely you are going to miss certain parts of your certain parts or certain areas. And if let's say you have focused more on history portion, then maybe geography is being negotiated, right? Or maybe society is being negotiated, or maybe some other paper is being negotiated. So you have to maintain that balance, because I have come across several such students, those who did perform very good in GS, but then they negotiated, or they somehow could not perform very good in the optional paper, or let's say in essay paper. So it's very important that how do you make your strategy in order to maintain the balance of your preparation. That is one thing. And then even within the paper, how do you make the strategy in order to get better result from that particular paper. So these are certain questions which are there, right? So in this particular class, precisely we're going to discuss about modern India, that how to deal with the questions of modern India, or specifically when it comes to the content of modern India, how you're supposed to deal with that, right? So that we'll be discussing one by one, and that what are the important areas for Mains 2025 that you should focus upon. But before I come to that, I would like to tell you something about basically I would like to tell you something about basically that how to understand, how to comprehend this modern India, how to divide it, or how to make it more structurized, right? So basically, the moment you talk about modern India, there are a couple of things that you have to first keep in mind, right, in modern India. So when it comes to modern India, if we'll see the syllabus of the modern India, so there are two things which are written. So one is basically the history of modern India, right? If we'll see the syllabus, so one part is simply saying the history of modern India, which is which is basically about various themes which are there, social reformation movement and all these kind of things are there. On the other hand, India's freedom struggle is there, right? So these are two important topics that we have to cover. Both are falling in the category of modern India. Here we are considering them as one unit. And then by considering both the units which are given in your syllabus, by considering them as one unit, let's say how to divide it, how to structurize it. Look, modern India is roughly a period which is covering, right, I must say from the middle of 18th century, right, from middle of 18th century, and it goes up to, I must say, the 20th century, right? 20th century. This is the period what you have to cover in modern India, and undoubtedly there are so many parts of it. But for your convenience, you can divide this modern India into a couple of segments, right? So if I'll divide this modern India into a couple of areas, in that case, there are three parts which are very important, right? The part number one, let's say first part is the colonization of India, right? The second part is about colonial policies and their impacts of India, right? And then third part is India's struggle for independence, right? These are three parts which are there. So you should see the modern India in this perspective. These are the three parts. And in fact, you have to understand how come these three parts should be treated by you. So it is not necessary that all the three parts are equally important for you. And within these three areas, also you can highlight some important areas, right? So first, let us understand what are the parts which are there in these three areas, right? So first of all, if I'll take the first one, in that case, it is about the colonization of India. Now, in the colonization of India, what topics can be falling here? So frankly speaking, in this colonization, you see the, there are several topics such as you can talk about 18th century India, 18th century India, right? After 18th century India, you can talk about the advent of European companies, advent of Europeans. Then it comes to the third one is about the colonization. These are three important areas which are there in the first part, right? When it comes to these three parts, colonization, the first part, within it, within it, I must say that there were three parts are there. Now it should be also right. So as I told you that these are three areas 18th century, advent of Europeans and colonization. These are the three parts that we have to study. Now 18th century India is simply about the condition of India in 18th century. Now what kind of topic it is? It is not a very factual topic, rather it is a very conceptual topic. Why it is conceptual? Undoubtedly there are certain facts part of it, such as you can talk about at one hand you can talk about decline of Mughals, then we can talk about the regional powers, that's the most important thing of it. And within the regional powers you must be knowing about many, such as at one hand Bengal is there, successor states like Bengal is there, then you can talk about Hyderabad, then Awadh, these are successor states. Then you can talk about certain rebellious states such as Rajputas, then the most importantly the Marathas, and then you can talk about the Sikhs, these are the rebellious states. Then Pathans also you can talk about. So these are a couple of the examples for the rebellious topics, right? Then it comes to these regional power, but then something which is more important here apart from these regional power, that what what conditions for that, this is somehow indicating towards only the political condition of India, but then the economic, right, the economic and social conditions are also very important, because until and unless your economic and social conditions ideas for the economic and social conditions are very clear, frankly speaking you won't be able to deal with this part. That is the reason, because of what I must say, this is the most important part that you should know theoretically, that what is this condition of India, which must have or which somehow facilitated the coming of European companies, right? And then most importantly, the colonization of India. So this should be understood conceptually. This is what I have been suggesting, right? When it comes to the next one, that is about the advent of European, advent of Europeans. It's about the coming of the various European companies to India, and it's about the Portuguese, the French, the English, right, the Dutch, and the Danish. This part I don't find very important for Indian history, and that is the reason neither they have asked ever a question from this part, nor I'm expecting any questions. So that's how you can ignore. It might be important for you as far as the pre-exam is concerned, but when it comes to the mains examination, there is no great relevance of this part. That's why you can avoid it. Fine. So this you can avoid at all. And then it comes to the colonization. Now it is the process through which India got colonized. And in fact, if we'll talk about this process of colonization, in that case, there are so many wars at one hand, or else we can talk about the policies. The policies as in, such as we can talk about the doctrine of lapse, we can talk about subsidiary alliance. And as far as the wars are concerned, so basically the battle of Palasi, the battle of Buxar, then we can talk about the Anglo-Mysore War, the Carnatic Wars, Anglo-Maratha Wars, Anglo-Sikh Wars, and so on, right? So there are numerous wars, and they are not very important as such. So that's why you should not invest much of your energy for the colonization. Maybe a couple of the powers out of them are important. And in fact, if I'll talk about the powers which might be important here, so among them we can say one is very important is Bengal. Now, Bengal is important for multiple reasons, but the most significant thing for Bengal is this, that ultimately this process of the colonization had started from the Bengal, and that is the reason, because of the battle of Palasi and Buxar do have great significance in the process of the colonization. That is how it is significant. Apart from that, the another state which is important is Mysore, because of Tipu Sultan, and the third I can say Maratha. So among the Indian powers, those who are those who were defeated by the English East India Company, which somehow facilitated this coming of the European the colonization of India. So among them, frankly speaking, only these three are important. So you should focus only on them, and you should avoid rest of the details. Now, maybe you are taking chance. I'm not saying that the possibilities are not there of the question, but then it is also important to understand whether, whether the high possibility is there of the questions from these parts or not. Frankly speaking, these are the most probable areas what you should prepare. Apart from focusing proper attention to these questions, these topics, there is no point of wasting your time into this part. And in fact, if you really want to somehow cross check it, you can see the papers. Practically speaking, there is no great utility, and that's how you can trust on my advice that okay, focus more on this particular part. Okay, fine. Then it is coming to the second part. Now this is one of the most important parts. So when it comes to the second part, which is basically the colonial policies and their impacts. Now, there are so many topics in this colonial policies and their impacts, and in fact, you may find the questions, let's say from all these topics. What are the most important things that we can discuss here? So we can say about the land revenue policies, the land revenue policies. Then we can talk about deindustrialization. Then we can talk about drain of wealth. Then we can talk about commercialization of agriculture. That is also one topic. Okay, fine. Then apart from that, we can talk about certain other policies such as their policy towards the army, their policy towards the administration, that includes basically civil service. Then we can say the police, right? Their policy towards this, their policy towards education, their policy towards development, right? Then you can talk about basically the various acts passed by them in order to make the Indian administration more smooth. So if we'll talk about the policies in that case, all these policies are important, right? So basically I have given a long list. Now, when you have to understand these policies, such as land revenue policy, such as within land revenue policies, there are three important land revenue policies, such as permanent settlement, then permanent settlement, then Mahalwari settlement and Rayadwari settlement. So these are three land revenue settlements. And then deindustrialization is mostly a debate that whether deindustrialization was there or not. So look, every topic that I have listed here, right? Frankly speaking, there are so many dimensions of it. The moment you enter into these topics, unfortunately, there are several dimensions that could be discussed, that could be talked about. But then here you have to be very careful that you are not supposed to get into all those debates whether deindustrialization is there or not. If the drain of wealth was there, what is the amount which is being drained from India? So there might be several such aspects which are there. But then ultimately you have to understand everything with respect to its impacts over India. Its impacts over India. Fine. So whatsoever policies they had been getting, ultimately you will find that these policies were having certain impacts, and these impacts could be noticed in different areas, right? Now when I'm saying different areas, so the impacts could be noticed over various communities of India, such as one, I can say simply that what impacts were there over the peasants, right? The second, what impacts were there on the working class or artisans, right? Third, we can say what impacts you find over the Indian society, right? What impacts were there over Indian administration, how it was getting changed. So basically you can relate or you can study them with respect to the impacts, because there are certain impacts such as sometimes you'll find direct questions on them, such as famine, right? So you find a direct question on the famines also, that how did this, their policies were impacting or having a sort of impact over the natural disasters coming to India. So this is how, when you study all these European policies, you should colonial policies, you should always try to link more with the impacts. Because please understand this point very carefully. Let's say you have been studying the history of modern India. So in modern India, when it comes to, let's say, deindustrialization, or let's say for that matter, commercialization of agriculture. Now, commercialization of agriculture may be a topic which could be noticed, not only in India, rather in multiple parts of world. If Australia being colonized, this is there. If Africa being colonized, commercialization of agriculture is there. If America is being colonized, yes, commercialization of agriculture is there. So commercialization of agriculture is a general topic, and in fact that may be a subject to debate, that whether what were the reasons because of what commercialization of agriculture was happening, what context was there. But then while studying the Indian history, we need to focus more that if commercialization of agriculture was being done in India, what sort of impacts it had been leaving on India, that is the most important thing. How come Indian, masses, specifically the people, the peasantry community, was getting disturbed or exploited, or it was becoming open to greater exploitation of the colonial rule because of the commercialization of agriculture, or let's say drain of wealth, whatsoever it is. So you need to understand the colonial policies more with the impacts of this. And in fact, whenever you study any policy, try to link with the maximum possible dimensions. Because when it comes to, frankly speaking, the modern India, there are questions which are sometimes very innovative. And it is quite possible that you might not have studied these kind of these kind of things directly in any book. But then while reading or revising your content, if you focus, okay, this is a policy. Now, what are the impacts? What might be the possible impacts of this? If you have been thinking in this way, in that case, probably your brain exercises, and maybe if you are able to find out certain, because at the time of revision, let's say you have been missing certain points, or let's say you find one dimension, but then you do not have proper amount of points, then what is going to happen? You do have internet, you do have books, maybe it is quite possible for you that you have been hunting, or you have been trying to find out the relevant content for that, right? That is quite possible for you. So that's how you will be compiling certain good amount of points on each and every topic which are there. So when it comes to the second part of the syllabus, now the second part of the syllabus must be treated in this way, fine. Then it comes to the third part of the syllabus. Now, undoubtedly, with respect to the modern India, this is the most important part. And what is it? It is the India's struggle for independence, fine. Now, when it comes to India's struggle for independence, there are two ways of seeing it. Here you need to be very careful. So let's write it separately, that we can have a better discussion over it, right? I've been writing simply here the freedom struggle, right? So when it comes to the freedom struggle, how it should be understood. Now, it should be understood first of all with respect to multiple stages. First of all, it should be understood with respect to multiple stages. Fine. What are the stages? Frankly speaking, there might be at least 3 different stages in which we can see. Though there cannot be any fixed number, but at least we can talk about 3 different stages of the struggle. I'll talk about that. Then it comes to the freedom struggle. So nowadays we talk about, there are 2 different kind of struggles, right? One, we can find the class-wise division we find. So one division we find of the elite class, and one we find of the subaltern class. So with respect to the class, there is one movement which is going on very simply, such as let's say it is the the movements or the political parties being formed in India, and these political parties have been launching the freedom war of India. So this is moderate phase of Congress, then the extremist phase of Congress, then extremist phase of Congress is being followed by basically the revolutionaries, and then revolutionaries, and further you find the Gandhian phase is coming, and so on. So basically, like this is like one elite class movement. Then it comes to the subaltern class movement, because how come the lower class or the subaltern class also got integrated into the movement, and how it is incorporating multiple ideologies within this freedom struggle. That is how the significance of this part is there. Okay, fine. So stage. Acha, okay, let's have the discussion on the stages also. When it comes to the stages of the freedom war, so it is not correct that the freedom war of India starts from the formation of Congress. There was a general perception that the freedom war of struggle starts from Congress, which is completely incorrect. When you find the Rangpur Dinajpur rebellion in 1780s, right? When you talk about the Sannyasi and Fakir rebellion towards the end of 18th century, so basically these were also part of the freedom struggle, because it cannot happen that all of a sudden the leader is coming and that the leader has started leading the freedom war of India. That is practically impossible. So ultimately, India was since not a fully developed country, and that is the reason because of what the things started happening in bits and pieces, and over the period it is getting accumulated or it is coming together, and ultimately it is going for a sort of bigger movement that's known as Indian freedom movement. So that's why we can say that this is starting from the rebellions and the uprisings, right, of the peasants or of the tribals long back in the in the end of 18th century, then in the first half of 19th century, and then of course the second half of 19th century. So basically there's one stage where you can find the peasant and the tribal rebellions, right? Then it comes to the second stage. In the second stage you can find the social reformation movement is also one effort not to free India, but to empower India or enlighten India, and it has also contributed for the independence of India. So that can be considered as the second stage. The third stage is coming with the formation of Congress. So moderates, extremists like Home Rule League and Swadeshi movement, they are falling in this category. And then fourth stage is the Gandhian stage. And the fifth stage where you can find that multiple ideologies were coming, and then finally the sixth stage is coming where the masses became very much empowered, and in fact they had started contributing. So you can divide it into multiple multiple let's say stages. Then there is another part of it stages, classes, fine. Then there's another part of the freedom struggle that is very important, and that is simply I used to call it many voices. Many voices. If we'll see the freedom struggle of India, frankly speaking, it is not about one voice. For a very long period of time, it had been studied with respect to one voice. And what is this? This is the Gandhian voice or the Congress voice. But then in the modern history writing, it has been altogether negated or rejected. Maybe Gandhian voice is very important. That is true. But it does not mean that Gandhian voice was the sole voice or the Congress voice was the sole voice. After 1920s, you can find that multiple voices are there in Indian freedom movement. And in fact, if I'll list those voices, in that case, you can find a longer list of these voices, such as in the category of many voices, we can find or we can write about the revolutionary voice. Then we can talk about the leftist voice. Fundamentalist voice, that is including the Hindu fundamentalism and the Muslim fundamentalism, right? Both are included here. So fundamentalist voice. Then we can talk about, right, the peasant and worker voice. I have been keeping it separately. Then we can talk about the women voices. Then we can talk about the Dalit voice. So frankly speaking, if we'll talk about the voices, these many voices are there which were very much participating in Indian freedom movement. And this is one of the most important area of research and the interest of majority of the historians in the present time. And that is how if we'll see the questions, a good number of questions are coming from this part. So that's how you should keep in mind, and in fact you should definitely go. Sometimes you can find the direct questions, they have already been asked, such as the role of women in Indian freedom movement, right? Or the women politicization through the Indian freedom movement. or the role and the participation by the Dalits in Indian freedom movement. So these are a couple of areas which are very important, and in fact, like, how these voices are sometimes being integrated, and that when they are being integrated, that ultimately generates a larger movement. And if they are not being integrated, in that case, they had been running their own movements, like, independently or parallelly, that can be noticed, right? So this is, like, frankly speaking, I have been marking it that this is the most important part of your syllabus, and in fact you should pay proper attention to this part, like, that you should always keep in mind. Fine. Okay, then it comes to, like, okay, the another part of it is about basically the various personalities and their ideologies, right? Personalities and their ideologies. Frankly speaking, there is no limitation. There might be n number of personalities, but then does it mean that we have to go for covering all these personalities? Frankly speaking, no. Now you need to very carefully identify certain personalities, specifically by considering the time period, right? Let's say if, like, there's something which is very important in the present context, in that case that personality may become important. If, like, anything remains controversial, or, like, controversial, or due to some reason it is there in news, like, you may find it important, such as Periyar, like, this is, like, he's important and he was, like, in discussion in the recent times. So yes, the question may be asked on the Periyar, or something related to Periyar, such as the temple entry movement, right? So the Vaikom Satyagraha I've been talking about. So basically the question may be based on that. So you should be very careful of couple of personalities. And when you talk about the personalities, you should select the personalities of all different domains, such as social reformation movement. One of the key areas from where the personalities can be picked up, such as Raja Ram Mohan Roy is very important, and, like, the Dayanand Saraswati is very important, Swami Vivekananda is very important. So you need to identify a couple of them. It is not necessary that all personalities we have to, like, we have to cover. MG Ranade is also a very important social reformer, but then I can bet on this that they cannot ask a separate question on MG Ranade. So how we are supposed to do it? Like, that fellow is important, like, sorry, Rajaram Mohan Rai is important, right? Henry Biben Dereji, we can say important. Then, like, we can talk about Ishwachan Vidyasagar is important. Dayanand Saraswati is important. Jyotiba Phule is important. Like, Swami Vivekananda is important. Periyar is important. So this is how you can identify the 10 personalities from the social reformation movement. Like, on what they can question, like, they can ask the question, and majority of them I have already taken. Like, I have already discussed the name of these personalities. So what I can say, that the personalities are very important, but then you cannot pick up the personalities only from here. Now there are certain people, like, they have contributed in various other areas, but, like, maybe they are not very much part of social reformation movement. Maybe they are not very much part of the Indian freedom movement, but then yet they remain very important, such as, like, Rabindranath Tagore, right? Now this person has immense contribution in various fields of India. Either you can talk about education, or else you can talk about, let's say, you can talk about some other areas also, such as, like, his idea on nationalism or universalism. In fact, this question has been asked, like, earlier, and his comparison with Gandhi, like, it's quite logical also that they can ask such kind of question. So this is how, when it comes to, like, this part, frankly speaking, like, you need to keep in mind, like, these kind of things. The personalities may be from the freedom movement of India also, such as, like, you can talk about Ambedkar, you can talk about, like, Subhash Chandra Bose, Jawaharlal Nehru, or maybe some other personalities. But then, like, there are rare personalities, because most of them we already study in the freedom movement, but then there may be some personalities. There may be some governor generals of the viceroys important for you, but then again there is a long list of governor generals of the viceroy. It does not mean that every person is very important for you. Specifically those governor generals who had made some major contributions, specifically with the positive, in a very positive perspective, such as when you talk about Dalhousie. Now Dalhousie had done so many things in order to empower India, and may be important. Canning may be important. So when it comes to, like, the personalities, when the governor generals and viceroy can be also asked, But then as I told you that what should be the guideline, that those who had been contributing positively for the development or the growth of India, specifically they are getting some new ideas, they are empowering any particular class, in that case they may be important. In the same fashion, like we can talk about certain women personalities also, such as Sarojini Naidu. The chances are less, but then yes, couple of personalities must be prepared. Jyotiba Bai Phule is wife. She is very important. So that's a 3-4 women, important women reformers or the personalities also must be prepared, right? So this is personality and their ideologies. And then it comes to the last thing, and that is what? This is basically certain. Fine. That is certain events of freedom struggle. Now, certain events, by that, what do I mean? I simply mean certain important events, such as it may be couple of movements, about those movements which are very important. I don't need to tell you, because since I believe that you all have been writing the mains of this year, in that case, undoubtedly, you understand what are the events which are very important. So from let's say from the 1857 or even prior to that, I must say, or specifically we can say from 1900. 1900 to let's say 1947. So there are certain important events, and questions may be framed out of them. So you need to prepare those topics. Fine. So while keeping in mind third part of it, now these are the important areas that you should prepare, or you should go for a proper strategic preparation on this part. So I have just written them, and I believe that that you can now you can focus on these areas while having your preparation on this part. Fine. Now this is all about the modern India. If I'll break up the syllabus, now this is the syllabus, right? And now, as I told you, that on the basis of our understanding, we are going to talk about couple of areas, or we are going to highlight couple of areas, such as let's see what are the areas what I have. I believe that they are important. Okay, so let's see the most relevant areas. So when it comes to probable areas, so look, Gandhian movement has always been important, and every year you can find that several issues several issues are revolving around Gandhi. Okay? Gandhi has always been important. So when it comes to Gandhi, what are the things that should be prepared on Gandhi? There is one thing that you should definitely prepare, is the Gandhian ideology. Gandhian ideology, or his philosophy. Specifically in comparison, right? Specifically in comparison. Earlier also, they have asked a comparative study on Gandhi and Subhas. They have asked a comparative study on Gandhi and Rabindranath Tagore, right? So this is one area that you have to prepare. And then, of course, when it comes to preparing the Gandhi and his ideology, just divide it into a couple of areas. That what are the important areas in which Gandhi is giving his idea, such as we can talk about his idea for modernity, his idea for nationalism or universalism, right? His idea for democracy, his idea for the Varna system. So you can divide social philosophy, political philosophy, these are a couple of areas which so his philosophy could be understood with respect to this. And wherever you can compare it with some other philosophers, always prepare it in such a way that okay, when it comes to maybe Gandhi versus Ambedkar, Gandhi versus let's say Savarkar, Gandhi versus Rabindranath Tagore, Gandhi versus Subhash Chandra Bose. So these are a couple of important probable areas that I have been talking about here. Okay, fine. And the second is the Gandhian movements. Gandhian movements. When it comes to the Gandhian movements, so specifically it starts from a anti-Rowlatt Act movement, and anti-Rowlatt Act movement, that is the first movement. Then you talk Champaran, Kheda and Ahmedabad, then anti-Rowlatt Act movement, then you see the non-cooperation and Khilafat, then you see the civil disobedience movement and the Quit India movement. So very basic sort of preparation is needed. No great amount of analysis is needed. What are the factors which led to the rise of these movements? What are the specific features of these movements? And what outcomes it come with up? It came with up, right? So these are various ideas that that is how you need to prepare the movement. So Gandhi has always been important, and that's the reason because of what prepare Gandhi. You can't avoid it. So many people can suggest that Gandhi ab nahi aayega, but even though Gandhi is coming very frequently in the questions. So that's how we can say Gandhi is one topic that you need to prepare. अच्छा मैं ये नहीं कहूँगा कि गांधी जो बहुत छोटा topic है. Undoubtedly Gandhi is a bigger topic, and in fact, like when I'm saying Gandhi, it is itself a sort of like a vast topic, but then you have to prepare Gandhi. Fine, okay. Then it comes to the next one, 1857. Now, 1857 has always been in limelight, and in fact, frankly speaking, there might be many dimensions of 1857. So, whenever you prepare 1857, like couple of areas that you need to keep in mind. So, one area in 1857 is the factors or reasons for the rise of it, right? The next is the geographical distribution and the reason behind it. Reasons behind it, right? Next, uprisings of 1857 is I think the way it happened, it's not very important. Geographical distribution is a very important thing, right? Okay, then we can say nature or character of the movement, whether it is the religious war, whether it was the first war of independence, whether it was the army sepoy mutiny. So this is a very important part, right? Then it comes to the objective. Then it comes to failure, and the most importantly that we have to cover is the failure and of course the reasons of the failure. Fine. And then the impacts, the various sort of impacts, the political impacts, the economic impacts, the social impacts, and so on. So 1857 has always been important. So you can't say that there is one year when 1857 is important. Every year 1857 is important, and that's how you should go for well preparation of 1857. So this is another area that you should prepare well. Fine. Then it comes to some other sort of areas. Women. Now, when it comes to women, questions may be framed in multiple ways from the woman or in this particular topic. कई तरीके से women पे questions पूछे जा सकते हैं. Now, women participation in freedom movement, that's a simplistic question that can be asked. That's a simple one, right? But at the same time, the women mobilization may be one idea. Then women politicization may be one idea. Women and social reformation movement may be one idea, right? So there might be multiple topics, couple of them as I had been discussing, and in fact it's good if I've been writing. So I'm just listing that what are the possible areas. So one I can say kids, women and their role in freedom movement, right? Then we can say empowerment and politicization. And when I'm saying empowerment and politicization, you should always understand that what factors had been playing very important role for their empowerment and politicization. Sometimes it is asked that what role Gandhi had for the women politicization and empowerment. Sometimes it is believed that their participation in itself, their participation in the movement, the political movement, literally empowered them, and that is how they are being they are getting politicized. Then women and women in both social reformation movement, social reform movement, right? Okay. Women leadership. A question may be asked on this, how the woman had been providing leadership in multiple areas. Okay. The woman could be connected to the revolutionaries, that how the women were even participating in the revolutionary movement and how they were fit here. So when it comes to the woman question, it can be asked in multiple ways, and undoubtedly there are certain women personalities also that I have already discussed, right? Certain women personalities are also important for you. So when it comes to the woman, you should prepare the woman with respect to all these aspects, right? That would be the best way of preparing women. So when you have been preparing any topic, focus on them in such a way that every area could be covered, could be well covered by you. Okay, fine. Moving next is the, this part I have already discussed, right? Gandhi versus different personalities in freedom struggle, rules and different opinions, methods and strategies. So it's precisely related to the freedom movement of India, but then it is something which is applicable to the other areas also. So when it comes to the freedom movement, so they had classes, like Gandhi had classes with multiple people. The way when I was discussing about the many voices, the many voices were nothing, but we can simply call them as non-Gandhian voices. In fact, they are being called as non-Gandhian voices. So sometimes it is also being said that at one hand, Gandhian voice was there. On the other hand, you can find the non-Gandhian voice was there. So this kind of comparison is there, but it does not mean that only Gandhian voice was important. Rather, frankly speaking, the non-Gandhian voices were also very important. And I have already told you that when it comes to non-Gandhian voices, frankly speaking, I find the non-Gandhian voices more important than the Gandhian voice, because I believe that there are more probability of questions from the non-Gandhian voices. And there were so many questions they have asked, right, the question. Then I just told you about some minor events, right, such as moderates. On regular intervals, you find that these kind of questions are precisely the questions from the history. वो ज़्यादातर questions हैं जो history से आते हैं. Moderates का क्या contributions है, क्या limitations है. This is one area which is again the way I told you that Gandhi is very important, woman is very important, right? Non-Gandhian voices are very important. I must tell you that the socio-religious reform movement, right, that is also very, very important area. When it comes to the socio-religious reform movement, frankly speaking, this is one part which is not covered you by fully, right? Now, there might be so many dimensions in socio-religious reform movement, right? So, if I'll talk about the dimensions, the simple thing that that what reasons were there, right? What was the nature of the social reformation movement? What outcomes were there? Fine. Then the various reformers. Now, mostly we focus on these areas, but then frankly speaking, it is one of the most analytical areas. Why? Because it is also being considered as Indian Renaissance. In fact, when you have been calling it Indian Renaissance, simply this question can be asked to you, that to what extent you consider that it was in Indian Enlightenment or Renaissance. Now, since it is believed to be like that, there was a debate on this, so it can be asked in form of question. So yes, you can expect this kind of question. It is even related to the national identity, right? So there are multiple dimensions, and in fact, the dimensions can be or the threads can be taken out from here only, such as let's say when I have been talking about the reasons, that what reasons were there behind the social reformation movement. Now, you know about multiple reasons, but then of course, then on the basis of one reason, let's say utilitarianism is one reason which behind the social reformation movement. So a simple question can be asked, how come the utilitarianism or the utilitarians were facilitating the social reformation movement? So that's how here you need to be more analytical, because there are great possibilities of the question, and it is one of the most favorite area of UPSC, and that is the reason you have to be quite careful here. And I have been listening even in every dimension you can find so many things, such as when it comes to nature. We know about it was urban in character, it was not dealing with, it was dealing with only the woman question, and then educated class, so many things you can write. But then there is a very popular idea, it's about the controversy, or it's about basically there are two sort of basically reforms. One is reform, one is revivalism, right? So what differences were there between the two? What factors were there which is changing the nature of the reforms into revivalism? So the questions can be asked on them also. When it comes to the impacts, again the various impacts in different parts that can be asked in form of question. So here I have been telling you that there are possibilities, great possibilities of the question, and this is one area that you should prepare pretty well. That will be my suggestion. Fine. Okay. British policies and their impacts, we have already had the discussion. This is the second unit basically, and the second part, I won't say unit, and I have already told you that the policies, like how the policies should be covered, we have already we have discussed about that. Okay, fine. So these are certain topics that I'll say that you should focus upon. And if you have been focusing frankly on these kind of topics, in that case, majority of the questions may be attempted. So I guess while having the revision on the syllabus, these are the areas we should focus upon. Right? These are the areas you should emphasize more. And in fact, you should try to somehow collect more information and more points, right? So I believe that this session was a bit useful for you. So maybe on 26th, I guess on 26th, I'll come up with another session where we'll have the discussion on ancient and art and culture wala portion, that what are the topics that you should focus upon. And there again, we'll just come up with some concrete ideas. Okay, these are the regions or these are the areas you should focus more on while revising or having while preparing for this part, right? Okay, thank you very much for joining this session. Thank you very much.